Yeah.
Awesome. So today we're going to be going over hydration, and hydration uh, a little bit more in depth, because I think everyone just thinks, all right, how much water should I be drinking? And it goes a lot far beyond that. And I think if there's one thing that's going to hinder your performance, I know I would feel silly out of all the things that I could be messing up with my diet, that it's my hydration that's leaving pounds on the platform, or my hydration that's messing with my sleep or my recovery. Because at the end of the day, even though it's overlooked, it is something that's easily fixable. So it just seems something that, it's a low hanging fruit. So definitely one of the things that you could fix first. So we're going to be going over how much water, because that's usually one of the biggest questions I've gotten is how much water should I be drinking? Drinking other stuff besides water, what exactly is an electrolyte, and then some brands. There's very few things that I'm going to say jump to supplementation right away. Hydration is one of those things though, because it does make life a lot easier. And hydration is more than just adding salt to your water. So starting with the number one question I get, which is how much water should I drink? And that depends on a ton of different variables, on how big you are, how much you sweat when you work out, what's your diet like. If you're someone who is low carb or no carb, that person's going to have a different balance of water. One of the things that I've seen with clients that choose to do something extreme like keto, for example, or just cutting out carbs in general, if your body is not going to retain as much water, your hydration approach needs to be different. So that's something to keep in mind. It also depends on certain medications you might be on that might affect how your body handles water. So a rough place to start could be for males, a gallon, for women, 3/4 of a gallon. And that just seems to be some of the most common recommendations I've seen from nutritionists. At the end of the day, that's a very broad place to start. So for me, 3/4 of a gallon is not enough. I still get dehydration headaches. It's not enough. So for me, I'm actually closer to like a gallon and a quarter, depending on how much I sweat. I'm also a very sweaty individual, but someone who's super huge and a sweaty individual will probably need closer to 2 gallons. So if you don't know what works for you, that's a very rough place to start. And then go from there. If you're someone who finds, all right, I jumped to a gallon and that's way too much, you might need less, or it could be that you just don't sweat that much, so you don't need as much as you think you do. So those are just very rough places to start. Realize, like everything I've said with diet, with the sleep, you need to see how your body responds to changes that you're doing before you jump into making even more changes. And another thing to realize is that, let's say you're someone who's been chronically dehydrated, right? If you're a guy who just jumps into having a gallon of water a day, if your body is not used to that, you're probably going to be running to the bathroom every 5 seconds. One thing to keep in mind is if you're upping your hydration, and I say, drink a gallon of water a day, I don't mean chug a gallon, chug half a gallon in the morning. You want to spread it out throughout the day. So have a glass with your, with your breakfast, have a glass with lunch, have a glass here and there. But you want your hydration to be spread out. Even after that, if you, after spreading it out, still continue to go to the bathroom a lot the first couple of days, that's totally normal as your body adjusts to having the higher hydration intake. Now, on the flip side, if you, for whatever reason, have upped your water intake and it's disrupting your sleep, your pee is completely clear, it just looks like it's water coming back out, and you're constantly running to the bathroom and it doesn't get better, your body doesn't adjust, that's a clear sign that you might be overhydrating. You don't need that much water. I think people think that there's no upper limit. It is hard to cause damage with too much water, but you are going to inconvenience yourself and disrupt your sleep. So realize more isn't better. That optimum amount is better. And the next most common thing I get is that they hate water. What do? I don't like water. And that's okay. You don't have to just drink water. One of my favorite things to do, you can actually get a water bottle that accommodates this. It's just a water bottle and it's got a little slot in the middle, and you can chop up fruits, put it in there, let it sit overnight. And it's a very low calorie way of getting sweetness that's not overwhelmingly sweet. If you just want something like a little bit of flavor, you can also do something like powders or concentrated liquids. Mio is one that comes to mind. It's like this little squirt bottle. Not Pedialyte, Crystallite. Pedialyte's the opposite. Crystallite, you could add in there. You could even go for something that's like carbonated, like club soda, for example. I'm not one of those people that's super diehard, all you can have is water, because at the end of the day, there are some people that will just not drink at all. If I tell them all you can have is water, they will literally just shrivel up and die. They won't have anything except for, the beverages that they feel comfortable having. So you kind of want to make it as easy for yourself as possible. If that means adding a little bit of flavoring, that's fine. Some of the bigger questions / myths and preconceptions that I've gotten a lot is surrounding, what is okay to drink, what's not okay to drink, what's going to sabotage your results. So just a quick list that I made up of everything that came to mind. Carbonated water is going to hydrate you just as much as anything else. I remember hearing a presentation at one point. This guy was a trainer, and he was telling people that carbonated water does not hydrate. It doesn't bond to your cells, or some explanation that he gave that made no sense to me. And just doing some more research, there's zero evidence of that. So if you like carbonation, great. Realize that if you find a kind of water or liquid that is appealing to you in flavor, you're more likely to drink more of it. That means you're going to be more hydrated. So if carbonation is what does that for you, fantastic. I know one of the first things people tell me is they want to add something like Himalayan rock salt to their water. We're going to go over some stuff that you can add for electrolytes. Realize that there isn't a whole lot of magical properties to that. There's a lot of different ways you can supplement. I know there's some buzzwords in terms of things that come up on social media, things that come up on the news and magazines. There's very few special, exclusive, like you need to have this kind of salt, you need to have this supplement. You have options. Find the one that works for you, taste-wise, the one that is cost-effective for you. And then my favorite thing is that people are afraid of when I say Crystal Light. Sometimes I get gasps and horror, oh my God, how could you as a coach recommend that? And the context behind that is there's more data behind aspartame and sucralose than there is stevia, for example. Just because something is deemed all natural doesn't mean that it's either 100% safe, 100% healthy. Realize there's an upper limit to anything, right? Even water. Too much water can cause damage. So realize everything in moderation. There's nothing inherently wrong with the data that we understand right now for artificial sweeteners. Even things, people claiming insulin resistance, all kinds of stuff. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of substance behind those claims. And also realize the devil's in the dosage, right? So if I'm having, a couple cans of Diet Coke a day, how much artificial sweetener is there? Would that even, let's say it is something that is unhealthy, would that come close to approaching a dosage from my body weight that is unhealthy? The answer is no, unless I have an IV of Diet Coke hook up to me 24/7. Even if there was something detrimental to that compound, I'm not approaching the dose needed for it to be bad for me. So do what you're comfortable with, but definitely don't feel like you are limited because certain ingredients are bad or are going to stall fat loss or cause a disease. Another thing to realize is that if something says low calorie, it's not calorie free. So I do want you to be hydrated. But if you're telling me that the only thing that you like to drink is orange soda, it's not going to go down well. You're going to be hydrated. You're also drinking all your calories, and you might put on weight and not reach your body composition goals. So realize you want to find something that isn't derailing your diet goals for the sake of hydration. You want to find that happy medium. So, maybe diet orange soda, right? It doesn't taste as good as the real one. For some reason, orange soda and diet orange soda don't taste as much. I know that because I like orange soda, but it's a close second. You want to kind of pick and choose what you're going to spend your carbs on. So with that in mind, what is an electrolyte? Because one of the biggest components of hydration is having a proper electrolyte balance. So just a very, very simple definition is that they're minerals in your body that have an electric charge. You're going to find them in your blood, your urine, tissues, other body fluids. They're essential for a majority of your body's functions. Some examples of that are, for example, balancing the amount of water in your body, right? And then balancing your body's acid and base level, your pH level. Everyone always thinks salt. There's a lot more than just salt, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, phosphate. So there's a ton of different electrolytes. Everyone just thinks adding salt to their water. One thing to realize is that electrolytes have to exist in a certain balance if you're trying to optimize your hydration and optimize your performance. So just dunking salt into your water isn't really the full equation. You want to have a bit of everything. So that's something to realize. You can also supplement that with, from diet, right? Maybe I'm adding more salt to my food, but realize you can get magnesium from different vegetables and potassium from bananas and potatoes. So as you kind of figure out how you're going to start to incorporate stuff into your diet that increases your electrolyte intake, it's not just stuff that you add to your water. There's a lot of solid base food that you can add to your diet that is going to allow you to get more electrolytes in there. So it's not just dunking salt on everything. As fun as that is, that's not the end all be all. Very few times am I going to recommend supplements for the simple reason I think most of them are a giant waste of money or people use them as a crutch. Electrolyte supplementation, though, does make it a little bit easier. I picked some of the top 3 ones that I've used because they have a nice mix of stuff. So, for example, the coconut water, it's got potassium, calcium, phosphorus, it's got a little bit of sodium, and it's got some carbs. So depending on what your goals are, that might be a really good intra-workout or post-workout beverage. Pedialyte is also pretty cool. The powder is really convenient. It's got a lot of sodium. It's got zinc, which is not an electrolyte, but it is something that is important to have, so it's nice that it's in there. It's more for immunity. It's got chloride, potassium, and carbs. So realize that you want to pick your supplementation based off of what you need. So what I like about the Noon tabs is that they have all that smaller amounts, but it's also a really good low carb option. So you might not necessarily need 100 grams of carbs at the end of your bench workout. What I did after the Arnold was I took coconut water and I put the Pedialyte powder in it, and I had this giant electrolyte carb bomb that I needed because I wasted away in a hot tub, and 10 pounds later, yeah, I needed it. That might not be appropriate or conducive to me reaching my body composition goals every single workout. So it really depends, what do you need? And, are you the kind of person, are you a bigger dude that you need carbs during your workout? Great, go for something like coconut water. But again, realize it doesn't have to be just this stuff. You could get the Noon tabs and have a banana to get the potassium in. You could just add some salt to your water and make sure the rest of your day is full of a bunch of different vegetables and leafy greens to get the rest of the electrolytes in. There's more than one way to do it. This is just stuff that makes it a little bit easier. Your best bet at the end of the day is going to be whole food sources. It's going to be more bioavailable, and then you're going to have all the micronutrients that come with it. So, for example, spinach has a nice amount of potassium and magnesium. It's also got a lot of fiber. You're also, the green stuff, right? Chlorophyll. It's good for you. So that's going to have more health benefits than just a Noon tablet. But on the flip side, I probably am not going to want to have spinach in the middle of my squat workout. So you kind of have to pick and choose the right tool for the right situation. Never rely only on supplementation. It's A, lazy, B, expensive, and C, it's just not going to optimize your results. But these things do have an appropriate place at the appropriate time. You just don't want to use them as a crutch. So now that I've rambled on, I don't know if John has anything to add or if Brad has any questions.
Yeah, that was great. And I would actually, once I'm kind of done just chiming in, I'd love to kind of hear some of the things that Brad's been doing. If you actually scroll, you can go back down to the supplements, Mel.
Yeah.
So just a couple of things that I think is important to note, especially what I've found, because I've been like still experimenting with a lot of these different supplements. I find the Noon is just the most convenient, just because if you want to kind of crush it up, if you want to put it in water, it could dissolve. So I feel like it's really versatile in like a kind of a contest situation, as far as if you need to get it quick or if you want to, kind of put it in your water and kind of have a slow drip kind of feel. So I think that's kind of like my go-to recommendation for most people. One thing I will say, the downside, if you are somebody that, like you mentioned before, is not getting a lot of potatoes, not getting a lot of kind of, green leafy vegetables, the potassium is on the lower side. That's kind of what I found. So like having something like coconut water and some of these other maybe supplements. So just being kind of mindful, like I said, of the ratio and the levels. So if you're not kind of getting what I've found, I think, because I think, there is a kind of concern for certain individuals if you have too much potassium. And I think a lot of the supplements are kind of regulated, and a lot of these companies are kind of careful not to put too much potassium in, because they don't, I think, want anyone to kind of have any kind of heart issues and things like that. So, but when we kind of need it, so this is important. So whether it's a banana, potatoes, that sort of thing, just kind of be mindful. Or like I said, in a contest situation, you're not really worried about your body composition at that point. So having something like a coconut water, that's something I would kind of mix in, like after like a weigh-in situation. And if I kind of know I'm like very depleted, And one of the things that we also talk, this is a little bit outside the context of this, but if someone is cutting weight, we talked about using, like, if you're going to use like a diuretic, using like a kind of a potassium sparing diuretic, and that would help with like cramps and things like that. So that's a little bit outside the scope of this, but figured just kind of worth mentioning while we're on the subject of supplements. I've been using LMT powder a lot as well. They also have a raw version, so if you want like zero carbs, I just enjoy like having the taste. To Mel's point, for me to get like a gallon plus of water a day would be hard if I'm just having water by itself. So having a little bit of flavor, so using something like a Noon or an LMT powder also just helps me kind of get the water down. And one of the things that I do, because I tend to kind of have to go to the bathroom a lot at night, I try to get at least half of my water requirement around my workout time. And I train in the morning, so I'll have like a liter before and then like a liter after. And that kind of knocks out half of my water for the day. And it's kind of, it's going to replenish and be used for the workout. So that's really all I have. I think hydration is really important. So if you are somebody that struggles, some other strategies, like I have like water bottles that are exactly like 1 liter. So I know if I drink 4 of those throughout the day, I'm good. So if you're like a smaller female or a smaller guy, usually 3 liters, or like I said, about, I think Mel's recommendations, like somewhere between 3/4 of a gallon, 3 liters, or somewhere between 3 and 4 liters, I think is a good place to start for most people. And if you're a bigger guy, if you're more active, if you're a low carb lifestyle, then you're going to err on the side of going closer to 4 liters. That's really all I have as far as to kind of add. I thought Mel did a great job of kind of breaking it down. And I think you got to, as far as the artificial sweetener point, sometimes you got to, pick your poison as far as like, I think not drinking enough water is probably a worse thing in terms of your health than having a little bit of like, NutraSweet or a little bit of stevia or some of these other things. So kind of pick your poison there. I think obviously in a perfect world, if we can kind of go without artificial sweeteners, it's probably better, but to what percentage, I don't know. I'm not really too worried about it. It's kind of like, I know like we had a question on the live Q&A the other week about, are you afraid of having, too much red meat? I'm like, no, not really. I'm like probably more afraid of like not getting enough protein, so yeah, maybe there are some kind of consequences to maybe having too much of anything, but you kind of have to pick your poison. So I think that's a really good point. Brad, I know you're like really big into like more of the low carb lifestyle and primarily like kind of more on the end of a carnivorous diet. So what are some things that you've kind of done with as far as your salt? I know like for myself, usually we recommend anywhere from like between 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams of like sodium, for example, like pre and post workout, depending on your size, depending on your activity level. Is there any like kind of general recommend? That's what I found usually, but like my LMT powder. So that usually is about, I think a Noon tab, I want to say is like 300 milligrams of sodium. So I usually have like either 2 Noon tabs or like 1 packet of LMT powder is about 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram of salt. Is there any kind of dosage that you found beneficial for yourself personally in terms of like pre and post workout, as far as with electrolytes or sodium or anything like that?
Yeah, electrolytes, I think a big one that's overlooked a lot is like bone broth. It's got all the magnesium, potassium, zinc. It's got all the minerals that you need for hydration.
Awesome.
It's great, healthy, clean calories. I find that anywhere between 3,000 milligrams is a pretty normal day of salt intake for me. If it's during the summer, it'll probably be 6,000 to 7,000 milligrams. And I try to use a Redmond real salt. That's kind of the popular salt right now because it's harvested in the U.S. and the heavy metals and all that. But I like it. It's a good product. And I think a lot of people are just scared. We've been told that salt's bad for you.
Right.
But it's really it's needed for sure. I actually just read a good study on hydration this week, and one good way that when you know that you're hydrated properly is in the morning. Your first pee in the morning is just like your last one at night. So, if it's real yellow and stinks, you're not hydrating enough. If it's you want it to be, it should all be pretty consistent.
Yeah, I think a consistent color is good, and probably closer to the clearer side. I think it's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get afraid of salt, and obviously it depends on, obviously consult with your doctor. We're not, physicians and things like that. These are general recommendations, and these are recommendations that we found worked for us. You got to figure out what works for you, and obviously consult with your, doctor or dietitian for like specific requirements. We're not telling you any specific amounts. We're just telling you what has worked for us in our experience. So that I want to make that very clear for anyone that's listening to this after the fact. Yeah, but yeah, in general, I would say somewhere between, if you're an active person, probably somewhere between 3 to 5 grams is probably a good place to start. As far as the 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams like sodium. I think most people are deficient in potassium and magnesium, so definitely, whether that's getting, your daily dose of spinach or having some combination of like potatoes, green leafy vegetables, bananas come to mind.
Organ meat, full of a lot of organ meats are full of
Yeah,
minerals.
organ meats is a great thing. Liver is on my list of things to try, but it's not going to be on my my bodybuilding prep diet right now. But it is on my to-do list. I know my business coach, he did like a little carnivore kick, and he was like loving the U.S. wellness meats, getting the liver roast from there, and a lot of great micronutrients. So yeah, you can get a lot of this stuff from food. But I do think, to Mel's point, I think this is one of the things where a lot of people kind of want to talk about like protein powders and things like that. A lot of times I actually probably spend more throughout the year. I probably spend more on electrolytes than protein powder. And then these other things, I get a lot of my protein, majority of my protein is from, animal products. And most of my protein source comes from like a red meat. I probably use supplement more with the electrolyte stuff, especially when you're like kind of cutting your calories lower, and then maybe you don't have the wiggle room to have as much of a variety of foods. I think the electrolytes become even more important as your kind of choices. If you're having more, for example, if you go from like red meat and whole eggs to egg whites and chicken, you're missing out on a ton of micronutrients. So supplementing with some of these things is going to be even more important if you're dieting and you're not really getting, the wide array of foods and getting those micronutrients in and not having as much variety. So I think that's
Pellegrino sparkling water is also a good option. It's full of sodium bicarbonate. So it's
a little buff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, like I'm not a big. I tend to kind of stay away from alcohol, even when I'm not dieting and stuff. And having like a sparkling water or a club soda, that's kind of like a treat, and that's something I'll like if I'm out to eat. That'll be kind of my go-to option. And you throw like a lime in there, throw a lemon in there, maybe even an orange if you want to get real fancy. I know Mel put a fruit in your water. It's just gonna be something to kind of switch it up a little bit, just kind of make it, even if it's like a novel change, it's definitely a great option, and you could still kind of feel like you're being social and have a drink in your hand and still continue on your goals. I think that's really important. I don't know if maybe to this point too, if you are someone that drinks alcohol more regularly, I think that is also something to consider, like, because that's definitely going to dehydrate you as well. So a good practice, if you are someone that is a social drinker, for every drink that you have, I would counteract that with a glass of water. So if you have, 3 drinks, have 3, glasses of water to kind of counteract that as well. So I figure I kind of mention that.
Coffee also. Coffee's dehydrates you also. Caffeine.
Yeah, so if you're having like a lot of caffeine can definitely act as a little bit of a diuretic. So kind of keep that in mind. So, definitely be mindful if you are a caffeine junkie. So that's all. I don't know if you have anything else to say about how, if maybe for people that I know, because I know Mel tends to like her caffeine. So I don't know if you want to maybe speak on that a little bit. I know it's a little bit
Yeah.
off
So that's
topic.
one thing that's super interesting is that our bodies will actually, like, let's say you're like a complete caffeine, like you've never had caffeine before. Someone like that versus someone like me who's had a horrible caffeine addiction for like a decade, your body actually adapts. So my body will shed less water than someone who's completely new to caffeine. And that's also very genetic. as well. There's definitely a genetic component to caffeine tolerance and your ability to metabolize it. But the more caffeine you consume for longer duration, it will have less of a diuretic effect. For most people, obviously, if you're already sweating and you're already at a net loss, you definitely don't want to have something that's going to make you excrete more. But it really depends on the person how much of a diuretic effect it has. There are some people where it really won't have as much of an effect. But what I would always say is err on the side of caution, especially if you don't really know your body. What I like to do, especially in the summer months, is I don't count my coffee. So like if I have a cup of coffee, I don't count that towards my intake.
Nice.
At the end of the day, even if I end up being, if I did the math and what I'm intaking ends up being, breaking even, I don't know. I'm not measuring intake versus, what I'm.
Yeah, it's
So
maybe
I'm like,
maybe
just
not
don't count it.
necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point, I would just err on the side of caution and not even count it if that's something that you do consume a lot, like me. What else was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Going back to the magnesium, really good. Also, an alternative is topical magnesium. They have spray, they have cream, Epsom salt baths, magnesium. I mean, and to a degree, most things are like this, where as you digest them, you aren't digesting and absorbing 100%. Some stuff is destroyed in the digestion process. For whatever reason, magnesium is one of those things that is just very, very fragile. The digestive process destroys a lot of it. So one thing to realize is you want to get the most bioavailable source possible, which is definitely going to be whole foods. But definitely realize that you also have other avenues such as topical. There's a spray called EASE, EASE. It's a topical magnesium spray. Epsom salts, you could take an Epsom salt bath, or even something as simple as just soaking your feet. And you can also they have Epsom salt infused cream. So for whatever reason you don't want to supplement and you just hate spinach, you can at least still get the magnesium in there. There are other ways of doing it.
Yeah, I've heard. I did that for a bit. I never really found a noticeable benefit, but especially if you are somebody that wants to kind of optimize their sleep. I know we talked about sleep in a previous talk. Um, to my understanding, if you kind of put it in the crooks of your elbows and behind your knees, that's a kind of a good absorption point. So if you do want to try the cream and you're not kind of getting the magnesium through your diet, that's a great point. So you can get some topical magnesium and it can absorb through your skin pretty well. I know like some of the really kind of high functioning life hacking gurus really love that stuff. I haven't really got into it too much. I have tried it. I haven't really found, but I also tend to, I've been really like kind of hunkering down on my diet. So I think I'm getting probably more what I need from what I'm eating and then what I'm supplementing with. But yeah, certainly a good option if you're not supplementing with it orally or getting enough whole foods that contain magnesium. So great option as well. I think the last point I'd just like to make with hydration, because I think it kind of gets overlooked, especially with electrolytes. This is like a great pre-workout. This kind of stuff is a better pre-workout than like anything that you can kind of get in terms of from like your local GNC or supplement store. Having like enough sodium, for example, like just taking some salt, that's probably going to do more for you than any kind of pre-workout will. Like, yes, are you going to feel like this rush from the caffeine? Like, no. But in terms of actual muscle contraction and actual performance, I always kind of tell this example, and it's kind of worth telling again for people that haven't heard it. But back a couple of years ago when we were competing at Boston Bosses with Larry Williams, those noon tabs like saved him. He was cramping up so bad I had to pry his fingers apart from his final bench attempt. It was like so bad. It was so hot. And Larry did not bring enough water that day. So I had to get some noon tabs from Stan Efforting, and it was a whole thing. But he was able to deadlift. He was able to have a good performance and finish the day. But that would not have been possible without having those noon tabs. So it could be a make or break moment in terms of performance. So this is not just a health thing. This is absolutely a performance enhancer. So I think it's really, really important to pay attention to this stuff for those people that are also competitive athletes as well. But it will also be great for your health and longevity as well. But it'll be great for your performance inside the gym or if you are a competitive athlete. So I think that was another Great presentation. We got my man Garrison just rolled in. Garrison, do you want to maybe talk if you're about maybe how some of the sodium and some of the electrolytes have helped you?
Oh, definitely. And those two previous meets I did, the RPS meet, the sodium helped big time. Like I had retained a lot of strength after doing like a slight water cut where I was weighing probably around 129 pounds the whole week, and then I did a water cut and got down to 120, and then I was able to retain my strength at being almost 9 pounds lighter, and I think it was mainly because of the sodium tabs. And then in this previous meet, the para powerlifting meet, I probably had like two sodium tabs before. I had one sodium tab before each lift, and I remember I was cramping as well. And going into my second lift, like I felt the cramping, but I took the sodium tab and drank some water. Yeah, and I was able to get 3 white lights. So it does play a big role with the sodium tablets.
Yeah, and then for those that are not so in the federation, a Garrison competes in, it's a 2-hour weigh-in, so that becomes even more important because you don't have that 24 hours to rehydrate and kind of really replenish. So especially if you're kind of close to your weight class, a lot of times you're going in a little depleted and you don't really have that much time to put the weight back on, get hydrated, have a lot of food in you. So that's where those supplements can come in real handy because it's more fast acting. You can kind of chew up the tablet really quick, swallow it down, and then kind of get some relief right away. So I think that's a good point. And I know you have a little ritual. You have like your cup of noodles and stuff before.
Yeah. That's got tons of sodium in it as well. And I try to carry some sea salt with me also, just in case tablets are not around.
So, like I said, you would think something like that, again, maybe it's not like the best thing in terms of maybe for body composition and for general health, but you're using it as a tool. It's something convenient. It's something that you could travel with, because a lot of times when we're competing with Garrison, we're traveling all over the country, and at some point you'll be traveling internationally. So something like a cup of noodles is maybe like it's a highly processed food, but it's carbohydrates and sodium, and it's convenient, and it can travel well. So it works, and he just enjoys it. So that kind of works well for him. I like to kind of do like rice and salt and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do in terms of hydration. And, by combining that with some sort of carbohydrate, that's going to really help kind of replenish the glycogen and kind of keep those stores high so you can kind of utilize that. And I just feel personally for me, especially as an equipped lifter, when your muscles are more full, from having the glycogen replenished, like your suit feels better, you get a little bit more out of your equipment, and you just feel more powerful when you're kind of full with carbohydrates, all those electrolytes in the water. For lack of a better term, it's like you get like the bloated feeling, but you can really use that for power, and then you just feel stronger when you're kind of depleted and you're kind of feeling flat, and your muscles are kind of flat, and you kind of don't have any glycogen, you don't have that kind of second gear to kind of push. So that can really be beneficial. So really cool. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording here. That was a great chit chat on hydration. Thanks guys for listening.